I will go ahead and call the meeting to order. It's 5:34. This is the November 16th meeting of the GCRA Advisory Board.
Michael. Go.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. Joel, you make it.
All right, well, let's see how this goes. Call to order the Gainesville Community Reinvestment Area Advisory Board. I will move on to roll call.
Fox here.
Brown here. Member Heidi. Johnson. Member Mitchell. Present. Member Norquist is joining us via Zoom. Not physically present. Member Blum. Present. And Chair Palmer. Present. We have a quorum.
Move to adoption of the agenda. We have a motion to adopt the agenda as is.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Motion in a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the agenda has been adopted. Has everybody had a chance to look over the minutes? For a motion to approve the minutes from the previous meeting?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
We've got a motion, and do we have a second? To adopt the approval of the minutes. Motion in a second. All approved. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right. The approved minutes have been approved. All right. Now on to communications. Do we have a chair's report? For today?
We do not.
Okay. Director's report. There, we have not have a director's report.
None tonight, thank you.
All right. Do we have any staff reports for this meeting?
We do not.
Okay. And move on to the consent agenda. Do we have any items that would like to pull off the consent agenda? Like a couple minutes for review. Probably a pretty special meeting. That are limited and may or may not be on the way out.
So,
Well, as long as there's no items to pull off the consent agenda,
I'm sorry. Since I know this so already, I would sure like to hear the staff quickly recap the housing programs and thinking how we do questions.
Susan mentioned may be pretty difficult for us to hear in depth report, so that part out. But if there are any issues that share with the staff on that. Any other items on the consent agenda to move forward?
I'm interested in an update on the Parkwood project and how sales are going and construction process, and also the dreams to reality where the applicants are those that did receive funding, where they are in the process.
All right, sounds like we'd like to pull for the consent agenda. Sounds like we'd like a motion to pull the GCRA housing program and the Hartwood, a brief housing program update and a brief Hartwood update onto our consent agenda.
I'm not asking for infinity lines to be pulled. But I do want to urge staff to have all the people that are mentioned in this narrative consider that they need to keep that open discussion in terms of the bill, the federal bill signed yesterday, and waiting to hear what funds come to us. We may have a huge pot of money that can do that.
Yeah, I think that's very valid. Hopefully we can get at DOT in this discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
I was going to ask, viewers are asking if you could please project your voices so that they can hear you, given the difficulties we're having with the audio today.
Okay, should they hear us through that?
they should. If you speak to the microphone, of course, it should.
Okay, is this better? Can you hear us this way?
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Testing 1, 2.
You're good.
That's better. Great. So we would like, it sounds like for the consent agenda, looking for a motion to have a brief discussion on the housing programs and a brief discussion on the Heartwood, and a brief update on Heartwood for us.
So moved.
We've got a motion and a second. In favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. All opposed? All right. Staff, are you ready for a brief update on those for us?
So we'll generally add those to the end of the agenda,
Okay.
because we do have Jim Greenwood with us, an outside consultant, we have to let our outside consultant go first.
Okay, that sounds agreeable to me and appropriate. All right, I guess let's add those onto the agenda. Let's move on to our business discussion items. The GCRA Advisory Board proposed changes. Are we ready for that?
Good evening. I honestly forgot that this was on the agenda tonight, and I hope you can hear me. So please let me know if I need to speak up or enunciate better, okay?
If you can get closer to your mind, very faint.
Is there any way that rolling cart can scoot closer to us?
We certainly can. Now, understand you will not be on camera all at once because of the angle.
Yeah, unless they, if everyone sat at the bottom of the U, we could see all of you. I don't know if you're comfortable doing that, but we would be able to see everyone. So Tricia, just remind me, but this item is regarding the motion that was made at the City Commission regarding our advisory board.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Maybe put a mic closer to that, get a little louder.
If we put a mic,
It's gonna reverb.
Oh.
Okay, so I will share with you what I know. It was a little bit of a surprise that came up about reducing the GCRA advisory board at the commission. We hadn't spoken to anyone about it, and as you know, we had 15 seats and 15 applications. So I believe it was Hayes Santos who made the motion about reducing the board. Some of the things that they mentioned just didn't resonate with us as far as the reason why. I'm trying to be just diplomatic because we've only actually not had a quorum one time since the new board, and then halfway through another meeting. So, but nevertheless, they voted to reduce the number to nine members. And I believe that they extended the time for application another 2 weeks. So I believe that window is now closed, and they will be making a decision Thursday at the City Commission. And so what I would urge each one of you to do is to either be there or call in to express your interest. Now you know we already had 15 applications. Those are staying there for consideration, but anyone who applied after the city commission will join that pool, right, of applicants in the extended window. And so I believe we'll have quite a bit of people, or quite a bit of applications for those 9 slots. So for those of you who really want to stick with us and stay on the board, I would urge you to, either speak or attend the meeting on Thursday. I believe that it's on the afternoon agenda. Is that correct, Tricia?
I believe so, but I'll double check and send an email out. I know it's right after the GTEC item.
Okay.
In order.
Okay, great. Do you all have any questions about that?
Doesn't seem we have any questions, but I do think, as members of this board, I would like to give some of the board members a chance to discuss if they have any either questions or opinions on that. Just for the sake of, if nothing else, us as members who've been on board, I think it would be important for us to pass some form of feedback back to the commission about that conversation.
Well, I attended the last meeting when Tricia sent the notice out. And of course, they said they were going to extend it until 18th. So I think my was still, and I don't know if I need to do it again.
No, if you already spoke on your behalf for your application, you don't need to, but there were some who applied in between before the 12th, in the second round. Or if you haven't spoken yet, you're welcome to.
Thank you.
I thought I understood that those who had applied before they reopened should refresh their application, or they don't have to apply?
No, they were all automatically considered.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I'd just like to say that, in your explaining the things going on, and kind of answered one of my questions as to why they would want to reduce the number, and I guess we did have problems with them. So, thank you.
Well, I was at that commission meeting, and I really don't see how reducing the board gives us, the feedback. I'm sorry. And I was going to suggest we all turn our mics off and on as we talk and reduce the feedback. I don't think that reducing the board has anything to do with quorum. It's a commitment of whoever's appointed to show up. But I did express that I thought the whole board had engaged in good exchange, that there were no ideologues stubbornly refusing to listen, that the discussions were real, and the larger the board, the better the cross-section of the community. Thank you.
Tricia, I think the ultimate decision will be left up to the mayor and commissioner. I don't think.
Yeah, I just wanted to at least send maybe a couple notes back up to them from us that are sitting on the board and see if there's anything just specific that we'd like to address about it.
Okay.
About the potential changes or feelings on the changes.
I'd just like to say that with a smaller board, it would only take fewer people to reach quorum. Life and besides commitment, things happen. That because they have priorities when it comes to family, different things that come up, and also I think my experience with a large size board was that it just made things move slower because you had a lot of thoughts, a lot of perspectives, and maybe this may just make it a little more efficient.
All right. Looks like we had a little bit of good discussion there. I think I'd like to echo both of those statements that, I don't think there's one solid answer, but, I think we would like to say that, a larger board does give a larger cross-section And then, it seems like it will be easier for us to come to a consensus. My one note on that, easier for us to get quorum, but it might also be just because of the smaller number, it means that every person is more impactful. So every person that doesn't make it to quorum is also somebody, might have that same negative impact if they come through there. Yeah, just a couple little notes. I don't know how we'll pass that on, but all right. I think that's probably enough on that. Any other public comment or anything? No? All right, let's move on to the GTEC repositioning update.
All right, thank you so much, Chair. Sarah Vidal, GCRA Director. And I'm really excited to bring this item forward tonight to you all. It's been a long time coming. But I also wanted to thank each one of you who are here and continue to support the work of the GCRA even through this transition with the board. I know it's a lot to come out on a Tuesday night and be with us, so I really appreciate your commitment. So the next thing I want to just, if you'll advance the slide, I actually can't see the slides that you're looking at. Are we using paper copies there because of the?
We are sharing the presentation
Okay.
on the computer that those in the room are looking at.
Okay. So I'm on today's agenda, and I'll just kind of talk through. There really aren't that many slides, and it will be more conversational in our approach with this. Today's agenda, I'm going to give you a brief history of GTEC. It has quite a long history and very interesting. Secondly, we'll look at the analysis, and I'll introduce Jim Greenwood, who completed the analysis, so he can discuss that and recommendations from his analysis. And then I'll come back at the end and speak briefly to next steps. So if you'll go to 2 more slides, this is going to be really hard to see, so hopefully you have it in your backup. But this is just a quick timeline of notable dates in the history of GTEC. So for those of you who don't know, the Economic Development Authority issued a grant to the city. It was for 60% of the cost to build GTEC, and that was in 1999. In 2000, GTEC construction began to the tune of $2.8 million. In 2011, the GCRA, actually as a CRA, managed the building for a hot minute. At that time, we did a feasibility study back then with Georgia Tech. Some of you may remember that one from back in the day. In 2013, we, at the lead of Russ Blackburn at the time, worked with Santa Fe College to talk about their program management and to partner with them on GTEC. And that has been in place ever since 2013. So in 2014, for those of you who have been on the board, that is when we began the master planning of the site surrounding GTEC. There was, we named it with the community Cornerstone, which hasn't quite rolled out yet. But the main thing that the CRA accomplished on that site, if you remember, is that there was a huge loss of buildable space on the property because of the way the site was configured. There's a huge utility easement that runs straight across the site. Next time you go out there, it'll become very obvious. And what we did was actually redesign the site so that the parking, the bulk of it was under that utility easement, which is all they allowed, really to be there. And it freed up more space for development. And so as part of that, we condoed the site. And there are actually buildable lots out there now. I think there are 4 or 5 right now that already have utilities to them and are ready for redevelopment. So the first deal that we were able to do on that site was with Concept Companies for Mariu Nutrisciences, which is the newer building that you now see on site. But there's definitely a bigger vision for that site. And, you know, we're hoping that with the growth in East Gainesville and the changes that are moving forward, that we'll be able to attract more tenants to that site. And the ultimate goal was to try to get folks to graduate out of the incubator and stay in East Gainesville and potentially build on that site and create a campus. So in 2017 and 18, that's when the Concept Companies purchase and sale agreement was approved, but also the condo association and phase 1 development began, and that was the site work to kind of reconfigure the site. And then in 2019 and 2020, we were actually very busy, not only changing from a statutory CRA into a city department, but also getting involved with Santa Fe again about programming, doing that contract, and working with Bill Dorman, who just showed up online. Hi, Bill. Which has been awesome. So for phase 1, we completed what was called a building needs assessment, which I'll get into a little bit later. But also in 2020, the mortgage to the EDA was paid in full. And so what that means for the building is that we no longer have obligations to run it as an incubator that focuses on certain types of industry, right? We don't owe the EDA anything else. We've been released from that agreement, and the city has freedom now with this asset to reposition it as it sees fit. And so the building needs assessment I'll get into, but in the last 2 years, we have built out and relocated from the 802 Northwest 5th Avenue building into GTech, our offices. And then, of course, this year we've completed the assessment. The release of the mortgage and agreements with the EDA actually was just approved at the November 4th meeting. So that shows you kind of from the time of payoff until we were actually released was a hot minute, because I think of COVID and all, you know, the confusion around that. So next page, if you're on the GTech repositioning slide, this was actually a slide from an older presentation that I gave in 2019. And that was around the time when we were discussing changing from a statutory CRA into a city department. And why this is important is because we talked a lot about the fact that the biggest reason why we wanted to change from the old CRA was to be able to capture the funding that was available, which, you know, is no longer TIF, but to reprioritize according to what the community wanted, which was to focus more on the areas that need it the most. And you all know the story that when we were a statutory CRA with the 4 districts, College Park brought in over half of our revenue, and downtown about 28 to 29%. And so the actual revenue that we got from 5th Avenue and GTech was not really enough to do kind of the major projects, you know, that you had seen in College Park and downtown, just because of the revenue, so, and property values. And what's interesting, the last year that we were a statutory CRA, even though 5th Avenue was so small, it actually eclipsed East Side in its property value total, which is very interesting for such a small district, but it shows you how important it is, location, 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 right? With certain areas like that. We never expected it to eclipse East Side, especially because 5th Avenue Pleasant Street is mostly residential without any huge commercial corridors like our East Side district had. So back to the slide, we talked about listing our building for sale. That was done. We sold the building on Fifth Avenue. The cool thing about that is that when we first built that building, if some of you remember, we said, well, no, we won't be here any longer than 5 years. And we stayed much longer than 5 years. But the idea behind that building was to always sell it, get it back on the tax rolls and contributing to the neighborhood and becoming a neighborhood asset. And so we always knew that wasn't our permanent home. And so when we were negotiating with the agreement with Santa Fe again, at this time, we talked about beginning building and lease management in July 1st of our first year, completing the building needs assessment, building out our office there and moving our team there. And so that's where the idea came from back in 2019. So if you go to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about the building needs assessment, which should have been in your backup. It's actually a really fun read, but I would go to the summary because I'm sure you're not interested in all the little things that are wrong with the building. But, you know, this building is 20 years old. And so when this was done, the existing building conditions, you know, were basically like, okay, you know, this is solid. This is a good building. A lot can be reused. It's well suited for non-retail oriented businesses and light manufacturing. We do have some labs still in the building with a company that's been there for quite some time. But there was a lot that was also isolated that needed to be done to kind of bring the building into compliance and some code issues. And so we, since the building needs assessment, have been working with city facilities to try to address kind of the low-hanging fruit, if you will, with the building. For instance, replacing the flooring in the elevator, you know, cleaning the floors, refreshing the lobby furniture, painting, you know, conference rooms and things like that. Fixing replacing an ice maker, you know, just little things to try to start kind of making these incremental improvements because really not a lot had been done over the 2 decades that the building had been there. So in partnership with city facilities, they've been really awesome. There's new leadership there, and they've been very, very helpful. And then, of course, we built out our space on the 2nd floor, and we can't wait to show you all. The one thing I will say about our space is that we were very cognizant of the fact that our space was going to look brand new, and a lot of the building had not been refreshed. And so what our goal is to make certain that any finishes that we chose in our space could be easily replicated throughout the entire space, hopefully one day. And, you know, that's a difficult thing to do all at once. And so, you know, if we're approved to move forward, it will certainly be kind of a phased project. So with that background, I am going to turn it over to Jim Greenwood in a second, but I wanted to give him a really brief introduction. He sent me his bio, and I know a lot of this about him, but he's quite the Renaissance man when it comes to incubators. He's been in the industry since 1984. He co-developed and managed for 11 years the Los Alamos Small Business Center, which was the first incubator in New Mexico and one of the first in the southwestern United States. A few other things I'll mention because his bio is really long, but it's because he's accomplished so much. He developed a proprietary incubator feasibility assessment model as part of a project for the Ohio State University, which quantifies the assessment and clearly shows the strengths and weaknesses of a proposed project, which is exactly what we kind of needed him to do, other than our project was not proposed. It's in existence. another interesting thing is for several years, he actually trained Russian incubator developers and managers in Moscow and Kazan. Is that how you say it?
Mhm. Yes.
Kazan, Russia. So that's very cool. And then finally, he holds a master's degree from Harvard University, so he's smarter than me for sure, and is a certified economic development finance professional, which I really like about Jim because I feel like not only does he do the incubator analysis, but he's very tuned into economic development and how these types of programs and buildings can contribute to the local economy. And so with that, I am going to turn it over to Jim Greenwood. And when he's completed, I'll come back and wrap it up. Thank you.
All right, Sarah, thank you. And Renaissance man. So what Sarah is saying is I'm old, just been around a long time here. I never, what's that saying? If I'd known I was going to live this long, I would have taken better care of myself. So I certainly can relate to that these days, but I appreciate the opportunity to meet with you tonight. And it's good to see some of you literally, it's not in person, but at least it's via Zoom. And I know I talked with many of you during the course of the study, and it's always nice to be able to put a name and face together after the fact. Let me just hit just a few highlights. The report is there, and you're welcome to look at it in all of its glory. But I just want to emphasize a few areas that I think are really, to me, the most important findings of the study. Number one, I was told right up front by some parties, and they will remain nameless, that GTEC does nothing. It never graduates anybody. There are no tenants there. It's just a complete dud. And it was interesting to see the reality, which is quite different than that perception. And the reality was brought to me in two respects. One is we did a survey of the existing tenants in the incubator and asked them some questions about their companies and about being in the incubator and so on. And through considerable efforts of Sarah and Mo and certainly Bill Dorman and his staff, we got 19 responses back. Now I'm thinking, well, if there's nobody there, how do you get 19 responses? And you know as well as I know, not everybody fills out a survey when you ask them to. So you got 19 responses. That was a data point right there. Then I collected the semi-annual reports that the GTEC presents to the city and looked at the past 5.5 years. And this is all in the report, but I'll just read a couple of items. On average, during that 5.5 year period, GTEC had 23 incubating companies. Now, these are companies that are actually in there, they're entrepreneurs, and their job is to grow and prosper. 23 on average. Now, it's all over the place, from a low of 19 to a high of looks like 30. But that's not unusual, particularly with COVID in the middle of things. So 23 incubating companies on average, very, very impressive. On average, 3 non-incubating companies. And you go, oh, that's the problem. It's those non-incubating companies. Well, non-incubating companies, which are often referred to as anchor tenants, are actually a very common phenomenon in incubators and can be very valuable in a number of respects, one being financial stability of the incubator, and also being a good mentor, source of mentorship for the incubating companies. On average, again, over the 5.5 years, we had 83 employees at the incubator, GTEC, and 16 new jobs were created every 6 months. Now, again, guys, if you were sitting in front of city council and said, I'm going to present you an economic development project that will generate 16 new jobs in this town, or even on the east side, every 6 months, I think you would have gotten some good support. People would be impressed with that. It varied dramatically, again, from period to period, but again, an impressive number. And then again, this argument, oh, well, no one ever leaves, they just show up at GTEC and they never graduate out. Well, the average is 3 graduates every 6 months. So you do the math on that, it means on average, and again, this is widely different from period to period, but on average, That's a graduate every 2 months, every 60 days. That's moving people in and out. Now, I actually did the math a few minutes ago, which I had not done prior to this. And I said, okay, so what if we say we've got 3 graduates per 6 months, that's 6 graduates per year. You got an average of 23 companies in the incubator. So how often on average would you have a complete turnover of the tenants? It's every 4 years. It's just under 4 years. That's a very acceptable number. 3 to 4 years is a very common tendency in a business incubator. So again, I think there were a lot of misperceptions about GTEC. Part of that comes from, quite frankly, GTEC is in the shadow of Sid Martin. It's in the shadow of the hub, and it just does not get the publicity. And frankly, I don't think GTEC and the GCRA has really stuck out there for media attention. Hey, here's what's going on at this incubator. Here's the kind of things that are occurring. And there's some very nice success stories that have occurred out of GTEC. Number 2, again, criticism. People said, well, you know what they do? They have non-business meetings at GTEC. And I said, well, really? What kind of meetings? Well, just kind of community meetings. And somebody else said, well, I think there was a wedding reception there once. And somebody else said, no, I remember there being a baby shower there. Well, okay, that's not typical activity in an incubator. But what I heard from the community from East Gainesville was, boy, we really like GTEC having a place that we can go and have a nice function like that. And a lot of people in East Gainesville don't know GTEC as a business incubator. They don't know about its entrepreneurial role. They know it as a nice place to go and have a function or to have a meeting. That's an important part of the community. And I would like to see that continued again, even though that's not typical of a business incubator. And it needs to be very carefully managed so you don't have baby shower attendees moseying through the halls of the business side of the incubator. Third, I don't think you guys, and I'm referring to Gainesville in general here, you guys don't realize what a gem you've got here. You've got a business incubator that basically caters to low income and minority entrepreneurs. Do you know how many cities in this country would love to have that? Do you know how many cities in this country strive to do that and can't figure out how to pull it off? Now, I don't have numbers for you, but I can tell you I've been hired by a number of them to say, is there some way we can do an incubator that could help stimulate some entrepreneurial activity in our minority community? Or is there any way we can get an incubator going to try to increase some income, create some jobs? I worked with a city in Michigan, which will remain nameless, but I've spent 2 years working with them, and they're still trying to, gee, do you really think there's some entrepreneurs out there? And gosh, is there a building we could put it in? And wow, where's the money going to come from to do this? You guys have all that. Now, it's not running perfectly, and it needs a lot of work, as Sarah was alluding to, in terms of the facility itself. But you've got a gym that a lot of communities would love to have. And I think it's doing good things for the East Side. And I think you should be proud of that, number one, and number two, try to support it. Number 3, some people very early on in this project, it was very early, very easy, interesting start. And some of the early interviews were basically, well, let's just get rid of all those entrepreneurs and put a medical facility in there. And it was interesting. I actually had somebody, again, who shall remain nameless, but basically said, the East Side doesn't care about entrepreneurship, doesn't care about jobs. We want a medical center. And I was taken back by that, and over time got a lot of different opinions. One that I particularly liked, and I want to share with you, and this was a resident of the East Side, and I said, so if you had a choice, would you like to see GTEC be a medical facility, or would you like it to be a business incubator to support entrepreneurs? And her comment was, why should we have to choose one versus the other? And I thought that was an incredibly insightful remark, that the East Side should not have to choose between its health, its economic health, and its physical health. You should be able to have both resources. So you should not gut the incubator to make the excuse me, make the medical services that need to be brought into the East Side. And of course, since that time, UF expressed an interest in doing a facility from scratch that would be custom designed as a medical facility rather than have to be a reno to the GTEC building. When I first started that the GCRA was going into GTEC, I have to say I was a little mixed on that. And then I heard some things, and people said, you know, we don't know what they're up to. We're not sure why they're coming in, and they're taking an awful lot of space. And bless Bill Dorman, he's worried about the revenue coming in because, you know, they're not paying rent for all that space they're taking. Over time, I think I've come to feel pretty good about the GCRA being in GTEC for a couple of reasons. One is when the GCRA got folded into the city, it lost some credibility. And I don't think I'm telling you anything you probably don't already know, but there are people on the East Side who do not trust the city. And when GCRA became part of the city, it was like, oh, so they're now part of the problem rather than part of the folks that are trying to help areas like the East Side. So by bringing the GCRA offices into GTEC, I think you helped address that by saying, yeah, we might be part of the city, but we're not going to sit over in City Hall and look down our noses at the East Side and do all sorts of crazy things that you guys on the East Side think the city does. We're going to be right there in the middle of your community. Day in and day out, we're going to be right there in the middle of your community. And if you want to come talk to us, we're right there in your community. You got to complain about something we're doing, come see us. We're going to be right there in your community. So I think that's actually worked out to be a pretty good idea. Final thing I will comment on, and Sarah mentioned my economic development finance certification. One thing that does still concern me about GTEC is I don't think there's a very good financial plan underlying it. You know, there's some city money coming in, there's some revenues from the tenants, there's some money going out to Santa Fe College for Bill's efforts. But in terms of really knowing, you know, black and white, does this incubator support itself? Does it cover its costs? What kind of occupancy is required to cover its costs? Is there actually a surplus of revenue that might be put into some other programming that the GTEC could be involved in? I don't think anyone knows right now. Now, there may be some folks in the bowels of city government who have a pretty good feel for that, but in terms of, and I'll use the term we all hear, transparency, in terms of all of us knowing, does GTEC cost the city, or does it make money for the city, or is it break even, or what happens? We don't know right now. And I think that's something that should still be resolved in the coming months. But be happy to take comments and questions about the report and anything that we've done to this point, but I'll try to keep it brief, Sarah, and turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, Jim. I appreciate it. So if you'll just move forward to the summary slide, I'm just going to point out a few things from the analysis that I thought were really poignant and important to the discussion. I loved this one quote that I put on the left-hand side of the slide because the last part of it really rung true to me. It says the city GCRA in East Gainesville community should celebrate the value GTEC has brought to East Gainesville over its first 22 years and should now commit to, quote, a new era of being even a stronger resource in community and economic development. And I really think, Jim, you hit the nail on the head when you wrote that sentence because this really resonated. There were four kind of different areas that I picked out of the analysis that I thought were right on target. And because it went back to our 10-year consolidated plan and the ties are really strong. So you can see that he suggested in the summary a 3-market focus. 1, East Gainesville entrepreneurs, 2, minority-owned businesses, and 3, businesses providing goods and services to the area. Those are all things that we heard when we did community engagement for the 10-year consolidated plan. Service-wise, we've heard a lot about medical, banking, and food-related services. And as you know, in our 10-year plan, we have some goals to try to address some of those needs for East Gainesville. But I really appreciated that, the themes that came up in this analysis really pointed back to the reinvestment plan. Of course, supporting East Gainesville entrepreneurs and minority-owned businesses would be wonderful to have centrally located in GTEC and to provide a focus there. The second thing that I noticed was the comprehensive programs and services, but really working with the tenants to provide enhanced coaching and training, and to really help tenants there to reach their full potential. And there was a comment, not just cheap rent, and we want to provide value, and we want the companies that go through GTEC to really go places. And there are success stories to build on at GTEC. And so we want to continue that and enhance it. The third thing Jim mentioned is community and social meeting places. And I have experienced a lot of different events at GTEC. And the conference room on the first floor is kind of sad, where we have a lot of events, but that building has so much potential. And with the site work that's been done, it's really become a beautiful place. I find myself staring at the retention ponds in the front and the back when I'm there, because they've just become so beautiful. But we want to provide continuity there. The East Gainesville community has already been holding important family events, community events there. We want to support that and hopefully enhance that feature at GTEC. And then finally, sufficient rental revenues. So there is a need to get a handle on the finances there and the structure, how it's set up, and to have market rate rental fees. But there is also a need, I feel, and Jim did too, for community funded scholarships for low income entrepreneurs. A lot of the programs that we're doing right now have a higher rate of investment for low income entrepreneurs, and I'm thinking of homeowners actually right now, but that is something that is a huge focus in our reinvestment plan as well. And so I'm glad that was picked up on as well here. So as far as next steps, and that's the next slide, I kind of broke it down into 3 areas. I will be presenting the exact same presentation with Jim Thursday at the City Commission meeting. So if you all are there, I would love for you to be able to share, your feelings about GTEC and what you'd like to see for the future of GTEC. The way that I kind of see it is there's the program, the facility, and then just the larger impact to the community and economic development. So we would be working with Santa Fe College again to try to look at how can we provide enhanced incubator services. We need to clearly define and commit to a long-term plan. As you can see, even looking at that timeline, you can see how there were different entities involved. And I didn't even mention the Gainesville, Greater Gainesville Area Chamber of Commerce actually managed the building for a while back in the day. But it needs continuity. And I think there's been a lack of continuity and leadership there. And Santa Fe College has provided the most continuity since they came on board. And then, creating an operating and financial model that reflects the new focus, which Jim already highlighted. The facility, we will continue to address maintenance with city facilities. As I said, they've stepped up, new leadership, and have been a great partner in just kind of addressing the low-hanging fruit. But we'd like to bring back a phase plan for identified interior and exterior upgrades. And then finally, with the community and economic development piece, we have economic development programs as one of our main charges in our reinvestment roadmap from the plan. And there's an opportunity to house a lot of programs there that would help support diverse businesses. And so in my mind, that's a charge that we have as the GCRA team, is to come up with complementary programs that would also help support the work with the program in the facility. For instance, microloans, a microloan program, the scholarships that were mentioned earlier. You know, those are potentially things that the GCRA can work on and work with the community on. Continuing to host events, but creating more opportunities to bring the community to the site. We've really wanted to have a farmer's market there, you know, once a week, bring food trucks there, and just have more activity on the site, because it's a really great facility and works really well for big groups of people. And then community engagement with the current tenants. To create community and understand their needs. And this has already begun. We've had one quarterly luncheon. I think our next one is coming up, but Modiel started those with the tenants so that we could get to know them better. It was a tough transition because the day after our plan was approved, the reinvestment plan that you all worked on with us, COVID, you know, was coming on strong, and we actually were sent home the very next day. And so it was tough because in our minds, you know, we were going to be able to move in 2020 and, you know, start building relationships and start working on some of these things. But, you know, we're unable to be there in the time that we wanted to be there. But nevertheless, the first luncheon was awesome. And just working out of the office there, getting to know people that are tenants there. They have real concerns. They have real hopes and dreams for the space. And we want to support that and better understand over time how to continue to meet their needs better. So with that, that's about all I had to say. Our recommendation was really just to hear the presentation and affirm, if you feel these are recommendations for next steps. What we would plan to do, if the board is in support and the commission obviously, is come back with the next steps. So we've already kind of mapped out how this could be phased and have really great ideas for moving it forward, but we want to hear your opinions, make sure we're on the right path, and also work with the tenants to make sure we're on the right path. So if you have any questions for me or for Jim, we're here. And with that, I will turn it back to the chair. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah. Anybody on the board have any questions or anything to start with? I know I have one or two.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks, Jim, for that presentation and for your report. I really, I remember our time during your interview with the board, and I really enjoyed our conversation, and I love the feedback that you've given us. And one thing that kind of resonated with me in your remarks is the sense of pride and support that you've given to GTech. That we really should understand the value of what we have when we look at it in terms of the context of the nation, and that we really should, like Sarah has alluded to, look at the new era for this and see how we can really maximize the value and the outreach in the community for other people to get somewhat of the radioactive fallout of the benefits that we could potentially serve to the community. I wanted to get a sense of, I see a lot of details in here, but if you were to grade our GTech on a scale of like A, B, C, and all that, what would you say the grading would be? I have more questions, but how would you grade GTech?
Just as a
overall,
as a business incubator, that's an interesting question. I would give it probably a good solid B. And in part, I'm putting it in the context of being a incubator that's serving a lower income minority part of the community. So I'm not trying to compare it with the Hub and Sid Martin and programs like that. And now as I think, and I think about other programs I've seen around the country serving similar population, similar demographic, I bring it up to B plus. I think I'll bring it up to B plus because there's a lot of good stuff happening. There's a lot of, and it's amazing, for example, how many people in East Gainesville know GTech. I kind of thought in my interviews I'd have to just, GTech is this thing over, on Hawthorne, and this is what it does. And everybody just, oh yeah, GTech, yeah, I know GTech. And they knew different things about it, but they knew it as part of their community. And very seldom did I hear, oh, GTech, well, why do we have GTech? Didn't hear that very often. People really saw it as a resource. Again, sometimes as an entrepreneurial resource, sometimes as a more of a meeting resource, and sometimes it was just that's a nice part of our community, and it's an area that, as Sarah was saying, well, gee, we could do food trucks because we got this nice big parking lot ahead here, or we could host a farmers market, and again make use of the nice big parking lot out there. So I'd give it a B plus.
Thanks, Jim. My next question is for Sarah. Reflecting on what Jim said about one of his concerns was a solid financial plan for GTech. I'd like you to speak to that as far as next steps, in terms of how do we get there and making sure we have a solid financial plan to really make this sustainable and I think really profitable. It's something being profitable as well.
Good question, Jason. Thanks for that. So a couple things. General government, and I say that we're part of general government now. It's hard for me not to refer to general government that way because we are part of that. However, the general fund has money, right, that has gone into GTech, and the ultimate responsibility has been with the city throughout this time. And so we have dedicated funding for certain purposes, but not to kind of keep an incubator alive or do all of this ourselves. And so it honestly is going to be a group effort in working with the city budget and finance area, and then potentially Jim or someone like Jim to help us figure out a program that would address some of these concerns, and then help us, to really get to a place where it's fully functional by itself, right? And there's enough, hopefully, for preventative maintenance and things like that. So I think it's achievable. No one's ever been tasked with this particularly, and I'm really glad that it kind of rose to the top of Jim's report because it absolutely is very important to address. The third thing I'll mention is that, with the mortgage paid off, that's a very good thing for the city as well. Frees up that annual payment. So I hope that answers your question. I don't have a lot of answers because we needed to really take the temperature of you all and the community and the commission, and see, what was supported for us to move forward. And then we'll be coming back with a clearer plan, for phasing this and addressing these issues.
Yes, I definitely can see how complex this will be because we got a lot of moving parts and kind of a different governance structure. But I would definitely like to keep this on our radar, like in terms of how that's coming and how that's formulating along with the other notes. So we can kind of see the progress of that as well. Thank you.
Looks like we have a comment from member Norquist. I'd like to recognize him.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jim, really interesting report. I thought you did a terrific job of really highlighting what GTEC actually does.
Thank you.
And it was interesting to me, you talked about the name, which I don't think you really touched on that in your presentation.
Mm-hmm.
That the name really is a misnomer related to what the current name is.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that your suggestion related to renaming it is important. So I like that aspect of your report. One question that I had also is that, I know that the chamber was initially involved or at some point was involved with it. And I was just curious, in other incubators in other cities, is the chamber typically somehow connected to it, involved? Again, I just see them as being completely disconnected, at least from it's my perspective, and they may or may not be accurate. But just, I would like to get your comment related to that.
Okay. Yeah, and thank you, Jay, for bringing up about the name. It definitely needs a name change, but it's a little tricky because, again, everybody knows it as GTEC. So as soon as you say GTEC, they know what you're talking about. So I don't think you want to do away with the GTEC. That's very important. It's just when people say, well, what does GTEC stand for? And you throw out the word technology and you just get the deer in the headlights look like, well, why does it have that name? That's not what they do there. So you got to keep, in my opinion, keep GTEC, but you need to come up with something that makes more sense in terms of what it is. The role of the chamber, that very interesting question. I'm not a big fan of chambers running incubators because, in my opinion, they are too prone to support their members as opposed to the community. And I understand they're a membership organization. If they don't have memberships, they go under. But that means they're in a bit of a conflicted situation where they're going to recommend that a tenant work with a particular service provider, not necessarily based on that service provider's skill set or qualifications, but on the fact that they're a member. And I understand why that happens. I just don't think that's in the best interest of the entrepreneur. Now, I love having a chamber on board in terms of involvement, representation on the board of directors of the incubator, some role, because again, they're tied into the business community, and that's very important. I just don't think they ought to have a leadership role.
Could I just do a quick follow-up? So you mentioned about the GTEC name. I agree with that. My impression as just a layman is that there's only technical companies in there. So that was my impression. So your report kind of highlighted who actually was in there for me, which I wasn't aware of. So I think a lot of the people in Gainesville probably think that it is a technical type related thing, and that's kind of what it's supporting. So I think it is important to get that particular myth or whatever you want to call it, kind of take care of that.
Yeah, that's an important point. I hadn't thought of it from that perspective, Jay, but people hear technology and they think there must be a bunch of technology companies, and then they don't see that, and then they're confused. So what is it? And maybe that leads to some of those thoughts about nobody's in there or nobody graduates or some of those thoughts. So it's just another very good reason why the name definitely needs to be changed.
Well, thank you again. That's all I have. Thanks. Thanks for recognizing me, Mr. Chair. Sorry I couldn't be there in person today.
No problem.
I have a question for Sarah.
Member Fox?
How many, companies do we have in GTech currently? I was scanning through this and I didn't see it.
I'll take that one.
Okay.
Miss Evelyn, this is Sarah, and that's a great question. Right now we have 25. And yes, I just counted them all from the rent roll.
25 currently in GTech at this.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, that is good. When I visited with you in Chelsea, I was very impressed. And I was one of the persons that stepped through everything back in 99 or whatever when it was first presented to our community. And I think people were a little disappointed. They thought it was going to bring more jobs and all those type of things. And none of those things transpired for African Americans in East Gainesville. So I'm thinking that's why we've got so many negative answers to the questions that you asked when you did the survey. And how many African American companies do you have? I know you got designs and insurance. I saw those two listed. Are there any more? Or are there more?
Yeah, like half-ish. I mean, I can go down the list and tell you.
This is the, yeah, let me recognize, Chair recommends Bill Dorman. He's the director of GTech.
Okay.
He's very, very knowledgeable. He's
Okay.
as well.
Okay.
That's some color to that.
Sorry, I jumped the gun. Apologies. At least half are African American owned or led businesses.
What can we do as a community to let our community, especially in East Gainesville, know about the companies that are in GTech and the services that they provide?
Certainly, we could do more marketing and outreach. We've had some success working with the local schools, the high schools, to invite people to talk about it, to meet. Also, the community meetings that happen at GTech are also an opportunity to let people know the other things that are happening in the building.
Okay, I think we need to let the people in our community, not East Gainesville only, but particularly in East Gainesville, know who they are. I know there's a Black Business Journal that comes out once a year or something like that. It would be a good time for them to be listed in that publication to help promote their businesses. I think we need to do a little bit more to, I wouldn't say educate, but let people know what the businesses are that is in GTech. And my final question, so we rent, the GCRA rent our space from Santa Fe because they now own the building? I appreciate the answer.
Sarah Vidal, I'll take this one. So no, the city owns the building, free and clear. We moved in there. What was mentioned is that we're not paying rent like the other tenants. And so as part of the kind of financial modeling and moving forward, that would be taken into account. It just kind of happened because we were asked to take over, we moved in, and there was no mention or discussion around it. So it will be discussed now. And I wanted to thank you for asking the questions that you asked and for pointing out that the companies there need to be highlighted, because I would say over a decade that I've been kind of on the periphery of GTech and in the middle of it, one thing I've noticed is nobody really knows the success stories, and there are a lot. And then how are we going to highlight the businesses in the incubator moving forward? One thing that has struck me in just sitting and speaking to some of the tenants at GTech is just how diverse the companies are in there and how they're meeting needs in the community, and also how many of the tenants are community activists themselves, and want to see a lot of things that are in our reinvestment plan for East Gainesville. And so it's awesome to be kind of quote living with businesses that really are supporting what we're trying to do in the community, and really get behind a lot of that. Just to give everyone a taste, the companies that are currently located there range from Greenhouse Financial to let me see, Miss Faye Williams has an office there. Fortitude Security, Girl Scouts of Gateway Council are there, and then something Tissue Pro, which sounds kind of gross, but definitely some kind of biology going on there with tissue. So anyway, there's extreme diversity in the businesses that are in there, and I love that this one place can support all that. And so how do we also, as part of our enhanced services, highlight the companies that are there and help them to get a broader reach in the community? So we will take that very personally, if approved, to move forward with this plan that we come back with. That would definitely be one of the things that we want to fix.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just wanted to ask, what is the next luncheon with the tenants?
Odile has that date. I see she joined us. The question was, what is the date of our next luncheon? I think it's around Thanksgiving.
Hi, everyone. Modil here. Yes, we were trying to look at some of the dates. The next one that we have on hold is December 3rd, which is a Friday at 11:30 a.m. The only reason I say on hold for December is I did get some feedback just recently that maybe we might want to wait to January. So it's something that I just wanted to kind of get the temperature pulse on everyone's holiday schedules. But the tentative hold right now is for Friday the 3rd at 11:30. Our goal is, if these COVID chronicles just stop and we can move forward, would be to have them listed for the whole year. And, I have been patiently behind the scenes, just to let everyone know, especially the last question with regards to marketing. We have been actively having conversations, not only with Santa Fe College, but with the tenants on these wonderful opportunities and different role models of other incubators that market and let people know who's there more often. So I think we have a lot of really great ideas and have been actively working on it. I can also speak a way bit to the financial model. When we did go into GTech, there were a little bit of conversations, with the GCRA going into the space with finance. When we became a city department, one of the thoughts was, at least for right now, a lot of city departments don't pay rent per se, but this was something that, with us being the GCRA and the work that we're doing, that we were open to that being a part of the conversation once we understood and got to this step of what the next steps could be for GTech. And so finance has very much been a part of that conversation. And it is something that we are open to look to with the city in this kind of collaborative conversation. So I hope that kind of cleared up a bit of that. And then when I did take a look at some of GTech's financials, COVID chronicles made it a little bit challenging to get some concrete numbers. But what I can tell you is that looking back over a little bit of the financials, there was a wee bit of that kind of break even, when you look at paying the utilities, when you look at upkeep of the facility, what the tenants, dollar amounts that were coming in, it was falling behind prior to COVID. I think that financial model definitely is something that we're looking at, from everything starting with contracts to how we operate the partnership. But this is that first step. And then Sarah did say, bringing someone that is a subject matter expert, similar to a Jim Greenwood, on that financial model on how we can really make a robust financial game plan. But this is sort of phase one, to bring marketing and financial to the table. And so having your feedback today really helped. So I hope I answered some of those questions.
Yes, thanks, Mo. Board members are welcome to the luncheon. Could you follow up with it? That was my question. If board members are welcome to the luncheon, could you follow up with an email perhaps to us to let us know the date, the finalized date for the luncheon?
I believe I heard correctly, so I'm just going to repeat it just to make sure. I apologize. What I'm hearing is to please follow up to the board with the specific date and times for the luncheon. Is that correct? I will. I'll be happy to do so.
Member Blunt?
As far as that last request, if more than one of us shows up, does that have to be noticed?
Thank you.
Thank you for keeping us straight. Yes, you were correct. So if at this juncture, we have kept it with Santa Fe College and the GTech tenants. But if we start inviting everyone, which we would love to, we'll be happy to notice that. So thank you.
All right, thanks. I guess I have one question for you, Sarah. I know you had mentioned on the Fifth Avenue building, there was kind of a feeling of a sunsetting there, or a 5-year sort of a plan. Do you have a feeling or a gamble like that there? I also recognize that, hearing Mo talk about this, it actually, thinking about it from a different perspective, at first I had thought, well, okay, the GCRA is up there on top. They're kind of taking up space from potential tenants, but it sounds like this might actually be a really good thing, because then that space up there, you guys will be able to take on the burden of landscaping and infrastructure and a lot of the things that, a small business and a small tenant might not actually be able to afford. And that sounds like that might actually be a really good way to keep rent low. But was there any sense of, this is a 10-year place while we watch Heartwood grow? We get to watch Heartwood develop out your window?
Yes, so we have 8 years left on our department. So we will not exceed that timeline. I don't think it'll take all 8 years if, we are to get the green light to do, the things that we've talked about this evening. But our space was designed in a way that it's super flexible. So once we exit, the building will be a wonderful space for 1, 2, 3, or 4 businesses, however we want to, or, whatever's needed, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
And, one thing I noticed from this, I should follow up that I'm actually a graduating GTech company. I started out, I got my first space over there at GTech, and, got everything going that way. And, it was an incredibly valuable experience for me. And I think it legitimately helped me turn my business into a reality. One of the things I do want to add that I didn't really see here, that may be something that's kind of hard to quantify about it, but I would say my experience at GTech, rather than, I'm a UF grad and I have a lot of experience with, the hub and those areas, but GTech made a lot more sense for me, just as far as some accessibility. One of the things I found there, though, that I think is something that may I don't know how to really describe this, but I would say being out there in G-Tech and being in East Gainesville like that actually gave me, somebody who likely would have been in another part of Gainesville, gave me a better sense of what East Gainesville is looking for, and gave me a better sense, kind of helped me understand that, what's going on, and kind of, I really don't know how to describe it, but it helped me, learn about the connection to East Gainesville, and it kind of led my path to here, and, hoping to push forward with, equitable development in Gainesville. So I think it's despite it, even if it is speaking to East Gainesville, I think it speaks to people outside of East Gainesville, and can bring people into East Gainesville and say, hey, here's a voice in the community you might not have heard otherwise.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You were finding all of it.
No, I just had the temporary office space while we were trying to figure out how do we even start a business, and you need a physical address to get mail, while I was working, all these kinds of things. So it provided a lot of resources. I attended weekly peer group meetings with Mr. Dorman and a few other really key people that I still stay in touch with that, help me for, still provide HR support for me and other kinds of, some financial questions. So it's been an incredibly valuable experience for me.
Yeah, I'd just like to follow up with Michael's comments. It kind of sparked value that there's a term for, and it may not necessarily fit your experience exactly, but there is such a thing called social entrepreneurship. And I think that G-Tech could provide an experience for students that UF cannot. And they do have some kind of social entrepreneurship, I think, portion of their curriculum. Perhaps that can be tapped or partnered with in some way to maybe draw some students and maybe even some partnerships with UF concerning East Gainesville. It was quite interesting to hear that we had, from what Sarah said, there were people that were actually doing tenants here that are kind of like activists. There may be even more students that we can even draw or have business ambitions to this side because we provide that value.
Great. All right. There's no other comments. All right, if there's no other comments, let's move on to the consent agenda. Thank you for that report, Mr. Greenwood, and thanks for everybody showing up for this. This was a very good discussion.
Thank you. Appreciate it, guys.
Okay.
Have a good evening.
Thank you. There's no, and just to clarify, there's no action for us from the board other than just kind of saying, cool, thank you for the report. Okay, great. Cool. Let's move on to the consent agenda. I believe the first item was a brief discussion of the housing programs and where we're at on that. Just sort of a fast rundown for us.
Okay, I think Chelsea's on the line. Chelsea, are you able to address those questions?
Yes, I am. What were the questions?
Do you have some specific questions for addressing the housing programs? Number one.
I really want to know how quickly any of our programs are going to bring affordable units online. I'm very concerned with affordable housing and particularly programs in the community like Grace Marketplace, trying to house people, their housing first, and can't move because of lack of units. So how quickly will any of our programs produce affordable units? And how strong is our effort to stabilize existing neighborhoods versus gentrification that's there happening.
Yeah, I think I can speak a little bit to that. There was a lot of echo in the there's a lot of echo from my end from what I'm hearing in the room. So it's but I think what I heard you asking, Member Blount, is pretty much when will these programs be off the ground? Is that pretty much what you were asking?
Well, with particular emphasis to producing, with particular attention to price point, I'm concerned with affordable unit production.
You're asking how are the programs going to impact home buyers?
I'm not sure if there's a mic issue or something, but,
I'm sorry, I did not turn my mic.
Yeah, I can, I don't mind.
Is this better? I'm interested in which of our programs, if any, are leading in the short term, like within a year, to producing affordable units. And are we doing anything that's going to be particularly helpful in stabilizing neighborhoods versus gentrification effects we're seeing?
Yeah, I can speak to that on all of them. Sarah, you don't mind, or you had mentioned you wanted to jump in.
Well, I just wanted real quick, Member Blount, to just remind you that really we only have 3 projects where we're currently looking at affordable housing solutions. So the first is Heartwood, the second is Pleasant Street, and the third is Porter's. And it's because we have those properties where there's an opportunity to produce affordable housing. And so the other programs are really centered around specific issues that we learned during the community engagement and just from our time and working, with the communities. And so the programs are very different than the projects, if you will. The projects go through a lot of community engagement, and especially now that we have this affordable housing action plan and we're trying to kind of augment what the city is already doing in that regard. The 2 properties in Pleasant Street and Porter's, we're really hoping to find a unique solution by working with the community. And so Chelsea's done an awesome job of doing community engagement. We just actually had Sunday our last engagement with the Pleasant Street community. So we had one, was it last week on Wednesday night? Mm-hmm. And then on Sunday evening, we were back in Pleasant Street. And so we will be coming back to the board. I don't know, probably not at the next meeting, but we've got a lot of information from that community engagement. And what we'll be doing is bringing it back for you all, to say, like, does this resonate with you? This is what we're hearing in the community. For instance, do we need to focus on senior affordable housing? That's a question that kind of came up in both communities about, people aging in place, right? And being able to stay in the neighborhood, but a smaller footprint is needed. So, we're getting feedback like that through the community engagement. And when we come back to the board, we'll be specifically asking you all if you feel that this is right for those communities. But, the important thing, and I know you know this, Kali, is this has got to be right for each community, these solutions. And they're only a small part to a much bigger problem. But as you know, we also have much bigger initiatives to push through. And that's, really our focus. Housing and community development continues to try to work on affordable housing. I don't know if that helps.
I was right in the Pleasant Pleasant Street neighborhood, there are lots of beautiful new houses built there. Those GCRA, is that a part of us or is that a private developer?
I'm sorry, we'll need somebody to repeat the question.
Well, you can go ahead. He said it was a private developer and they said affordable housing.
Yeah, sorry, I'll jump in on this. The question was whether or not, or what the sense of how much of the new housing that's going up in Pleasant Street is GCRA or anything like that. But my understanding is the vast majority of it is private development. And I don't believe the GCRA has moved forward on any new housing projects in Pleasant Street.
But that goes back to gentrification. There are at least 10 or 11 or more new homes there, and they are for rent. But the rent is $1,900 a month or more. So that is a way of gentrification because the average person who works a 9 to 5 or $15 an hour job, they can't afford $1,900 a month for rent. And that really, really did concern me. I said, oh my God, $1,900 a month for rent. So that's a different form of gentrification, I think. I was always surprised by the amount of the rent. Thank you.
All right, are there any other comments on the housing programs? Otherwise, we'll move on to a brief update on Heartwood, and you can go ahead and repeat your question, Member Mitchell, about the activation department.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted an update on both the marketing portion, the market level sales, and what's the progress in terms of actual buyers, people that are going to approve for loans, and also what's the progress and where are people in the process with the dreams to reality homes, and what does construction look like right now?
Okay, so actually, I'll take that question. Hi, Trisha Lopez, GCRA staff. So Heartwood we have transitioned the lead project manager. Dan Gill and I are working as a team. He's handling still a lot of the contracts, the landscaping in the front, the signage, and all of that. And I'm handling coordination of all of the cooks in the kitchen. Because as you know, there are a lot of cooks in the kitchen. So I'll start with the dreams to reality. We have 11 buyers, all 11 buyers. They have signed PSAs. They chose their lots. And we are in the process of negotiating a construction contract for those. The first ones actually came through, today's Tuesday. They came through either Friday or we got one this afternoon. So they're like freshly coming in. As you know, this is a challenging time to be building because construction costs are fluctuating and there are supply chain issues. And so we've been working really closely with the builders to try to, mitigate some of the issues that we see coming. But we're in a really good place with the D2R. We're like this close to executing the first contract. And at that point, we're hoping to have like a big, marketing celebration that will be finally breaking ground. So the showcase homes, we had about 7 initially interested, and when the construction costs came back, they were a bit higher than expected. So the GCRA will be conveying the lots. We had to wait for a city commission decision that was made in October. And unfortunately, the wait time, most of them have dropped out. There are still a few that are interested, and we're waiting for the costs to come back so they can decide whether they're able to move forward. And then as far as marketing those lots will be, the Team Dynamo and the builders are working on different listing prices that are higher than what we originally thought, and then we'll be restarting the big marketing push.
I'd like to follow up with at least one note towards that. I'd like to ask people on the board at least to try and, have a little bit of patience with some of the hardwood stuff, the housing issues, or not even just the housing issues, the construction issues and rising prices within housing is it's a very serious nationwide issue that a lot of people are stuck behind, and it's unfortunately has a much bigger ramification for people who, can't just afford to wait or pay massive prices on things.
I have a question. Is there anything that the GCRA can do to help supplement some of the problems? We all know the rise of material and construction costs. Is there anything, are any funds available from the emergency money or something you could probably ask the city about to help this project, to help people who had anticipated getting a house, but now everything is coming back much higher? So is there anything we can do, the city can do? I know we got billions of dollars from the emergency money, and I'm just wondering if we could use some of those dollars, because I know we're doing $9 billion to the broadband. If people don't have a place to stay, they don't need broadband. I mean, but that's the amount of money that was set aside that's in the budget for broadband. So maybe we need to rethink or talk to our commissioners or see if there's any way some of those dollars can be directed to those people who thought they were going to get a home. And it's going to be much more than they can afford now.
Yeah, we can definitely look into that, but the first thing that we are doing is we are conveying the lots, so there won't be a cost for the land.
Okay.
That they'll only have to pay for the construction. So that in itself is an incentive.
Yeah, it's a big incentive. I didn't know that.
To be clear, the Dreams to Reality, the 11 homes, they're not in jeopardy by this money.
No, they're not.
Thank you.
Okay.
That seems like the conclusion of our normal business. Let's see. All right. There appear to be no members of the public here. Are there any public comment coming in online?
There is not.
Okay.
Are there any member comment? This may be the last time most of us get together. I'd like to recognize member one.
Earlier, we talked about Thursday's commission meeting. I looked at the agenda. Item 4 of the business items is the board appointments. And the first 2 are some rezonings that might be a little deep. So I would guess pretty surely our item will come up after citizen comment, because they start at 11:30 and wait a minute, I'm thinking of the county. The city starts, is it at 1 o'clock?
1 o'clock.
And then I think they have a time certain for the first public comment. So this will probably happen after a public comment, by the time they get through their preliminary stuff and the opening and the agendas and the first 2 items. So if you want to be there when they bring up that item, I would guess be there by 1:30 to be sure you catch that item. That's if they're swift.
Yeah.
Well, they were on the 18th when we were there before it came up pretty quickly. Everything was out of time. And 1 o'clock, and I think by 1:30 we were done.
Yeah, this last commission meeting, there was about an hour of discussion on the consent agenda. But, right. Anything else?
Yes, I'd just like to say for the record, regardless of whether or not I get reappointed or not, it's been a pleasure serving with my fellow council members and just working it out, processing things, and being able to interact with the staff. Really appreciate the work, the hard work that y'all put in over the years. And I just want to say, regardless, I would be here.
Okay.
Even before I became a board member, I was at the East Side CRA meetings and still plan to be connected and involved and putting my voice and my input and energy towards seeing that new era that Sarah talked about. That's really something that burns in me, and my personal fire and influence, I refuse to let it go out regardless of where I sit on the board or off. And just want to say thank you to all my fellow board members and staff for the last couple of years thereabouts. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Move for adjournment.
I will move for adjournment if there's no.
Mr. Chair,
Oh,
the next meeting,
we want discussion on
So
that.
the next meeting was scheduled for December 14th. I believe that was the date that, the Tuesday before it normally would happen.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, we'll do that last.
I do have a question for staff, if I may.
Sure.
I got an email today saying something about my application for city board is pending, has not been submitted, but I thought I understood that my application here was definitely in the list.
You are definitely in the backup because I saw
Okay.
it today.
Okay, I'll ignore it.
Great.
Thank you.
All right, with that, there's no objection. The meeting is adjourned.